My daughter told me there wasn't room for me on the family trip to Disneyland because I'd slow everyone down. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found out later. That she'd already replaced me with someone else and quietly taken control of my home, my future, and my trust. That was the moment I knew I had to disappear. Not to run away, but to take my life back piece by piece. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or quietly pushed aside by the very people you loved most, this story is for you. Stay with me until the end. It just might change the way you see yourself. And if it touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment below and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded it's never too late to choose yourself. I've lived in Anaheim my whole life, just 15 minutes from Disneyland. I can still remember holding my daughter Chelsea's tiny hand as we waited in line for the Dumbo ride. She was 5 years old, wearing Minnie Mouse ears too big for her head, eyes wide open like she was watching heaven itself. Back then, we'd go every year. I saved up for it. Sometimes I'd skip buying myself new shoes or cancel the landline just to afford the park tickets. But I did it because those moments, those giggles under fireworks, those sticky fingers from cotton candy, they were everything. Now I'm 68, widowed for 6 years. I still keep that pair of Minnie ears on the hallway shelf. They're a little dusty but still bright red with white polka dots. Every time I dust them off, I remember the sound of Chelsea's laughter on Main Street. So when Ruby, my 14-year-old granddaughter, mentioned they were planning a trip to Disneyland over spring break, my heart leapt a little. "Oh," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "The whole family going?" "Yep," she chirped. "Mom booked the hotel already. We're staying inside the park this time. The cool resort with the pool and fireworks view. Inside the park." I smiled. That was always my dream back then. We could only afford to stay at a cheap motel down Catella Avenue. Later that night, I called Chelsea. Ruby mentioned the trip, I said. "That sounds exciting." "Oh, yes," she replied, her voice all sunshine and smooth edges. "We've been meaning to do this for years. Daniel's parents are flying in from Oregon, so it's a big deal. Finally, all 6 of us under one roof." I felt a flicker of confusion. "All 6 I asked, though I already felt my stomach tighten." She paused just for a breath, but I caught it. "Yes," she said. "Me, Daniel, the kids, and his mom and dad. It's their first time at Disney, so we wanted to treat them." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. My hand trembled just a little. "And me?" Her voice softened, almost too soft, like honey poured over a bruise. "Oh, Mom." I thought about it, but honestly, I didn't want to tire you out. Disneyland's exhausting. So much walking, heat. You'd probably be miserable. I felt that sentence land in my chest like a stone. "You don't think I'd keep up?" She laughed, light and polite. The kind of laugh people use to dismiss things without sounding cruel. "It's not that, it's just, Daniel's parents are younger, more active. You know how fast-paced it is with the kids. You've had your Disney days. This is their turn." That was the moment. That one line. "You've had your Disney days." I don't know if she realized what she was saying, or maybe she did. I hung up not long after, told her to send pictures to have fun. I think I even said sounds magical. But when I sat down on the edge of my bed, those words echoed. "You've had your Disney days." And I realized something. They weren't just excluding me from a trip. They were retiring me from their lives. I wasn't angry, not yet. I just felt small, like someone had redrawn the map of our family, and I wasn't on it anymore. I walked to the hallway and picked up those old Minnie ears, ran my fingers along the headband. The velvet was worn, the bow a little crushed, but it still held the shape of memory. I sat at the kitchen table, made a cup of tea, and stared out the window at the orange tree blooming in my backyard. I thought about all the times I babysat last minute, the times I baked birthday cakes from scratch when Chelsea forgot to order one, the soccer games I drove to, the emergency pickups, the stomach bugs, the sleepovers, the school concerts. And I wondered, at what point did I stop being part of the magic? I didn't need to go on the rides. I didn't need matching t-shirts. I just wanted to be part of the memory. But they'd made room for Daniel's parents, people who hadn't changed Chelsea's diapers, who didn't wait outside piano recitals with a Rose, who weren't there for the nights she came home crying after prom. They had 6 spots, And I wasn't one of them. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just folded a load of laundry and changed the batteries in the hallway smoke detector. Funny the things you do to avoid feeling too much. But something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a story about a Disneyland trip. It was the beginning of the last time I would wait around for permission to belong. After that phone call with Chelsea, I tried to convince myself it wasn't personal. I told myself maybe the trip really was too exhausting. Maybe I would have slowed them down. Maybe it wasn't about being left behind, but about being protected. But you know that little voice inside you, the one that taps gently at your ribs when something isn't quite right. Mine started tapping louder every day. 3 days later, I drove over to Chelsea's house to drop off some homemade brownies Ruby liked. Her favorite extra fudge, no nuts. They'd always been our little secret. Chelsea was out picking up sunscreen and water bottles for the trip. Daniel was inside fiddling with the suitcases. The kids were in the backyard, splashing in the pool, screaming like seagulls. I stepped inside the kitchen and set the brownies on the counter. I was just about to leave a note when something caught my eye on the dining room table. There, spread out neatly, were their travel documents: Disneyland Resort confirmation, e-tickets, itinerary. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But something in me froze. I leaned in. 6 names: Chelsea, Daniel, Ruby, Eli, and then Catherine and Donald Walker, Daniel's parents. Not Mr. and Mrs. No, these were first names listed like they were family. Because of course they were family, just not mine. My heart didn't drop. It didn't break. It went silent, like a room right before the lights go out. I stood there, fingers tightening around the back of a dining chair. I read the names again and again as if by doing so, one might magically morph into Margery Collins. But they didn't. There was room for 6, all right, just not for me. I turned to leave, still holding the chair. That's when Ruby bounced in dripping water onto the tile towel slung over one shoulder, cheeks glowing with summer joy. "Bah!" she yelled playfully, making me jump. Then she laughed and threw her arms around me. "You scared me," she said. I smiled, holding her for a second longer than usual. "You excited for Disneyland?" I asked softly. "Oh my gosh, yes. Grandma Catherine made us t-shirts with our names. Hers says Disney Queen. We're doing breakfast with Mickey and dinner with the Star Wars characters. Grandpa Donald is already planning our route through the park." I swallowed, nodded. "Sounds like a blast." Ruby lowered her voice. "Don't be mad. Okay, I asked Mommy why you weren't going too. She said..." Her voice trailed off as she twisted her towel. "She said you'd get tired and make everyone walk slower." There it was, spoken like children do, honest, unfiltered, and without cruelty. I smiled again, trying to keep it from cracking. "I understand, honey. Really, go have fun." She kissed my cheek and ran off, and I stood there next to those crisp printed tickets, hearing only one sentence echo in my mind: "You'd make everyone walk slower." It wasn't just that I wasn't invited. It wasn't just that someone else had taken my place. It was that I had been redefined from someone they once loved to someone they now tolerated, at best. On the drive home, I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't cry either. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of pain that sits low, heavy, and still like a stone at the bottom of a lake. I parked the car, went inside, and sat down on the couch. And then I remembered something Eli said the week before while helping me carry groceries. "Mom says we'll live here one day. This'll be our house." I had laughed at the time, thought it was just a cute kid saying something silly. But now, something didn't feel right. I walked into the spare bedroom, opened the drawer with all my old paperwork, birth certificates, property taxes, power of attorney forms. It took me a while, but I found it. A copy of the limited power of attorney I had signed 5 years ago when I broke my hip and needed Chelsea to handle my taxes and medical paperwork. Just temporary. Just until I recovered. She said she'd shred it later. Apparently she didn't. Tucked in with that form were some bank notices I didn't recognize. I followed the trail. A few calls to the county clerk, then to the bank. I had to verify who I was 3 times. And that's when I learned Chelsea had taken out a $60,000 loan using my house as collateral. The home I had lived in for over 40 years, the one my husband and I built together, the one I had paid off in full by my 62nd birthday. She had used that old signature filed as active and claimed I had given her authority for emergencies. I sat at the dining table surrounded by paper that smelled like betrayal. I wasn't just left out of Disneyland, I was left out of my own life. They didn't just make room for someone else, they decided I didn't matter, that I was optional, disposable. I kept thinking about that sentence. You'd slow everyone down. Maybe I would. Maybe I'd stop to admire the flowers. Maybe I'd ask for breaks. Maybe I'd walk a little slower. But I realized something right then. I may walk slower, but I see more, I feel more, I remember more. And I've lived long enough to know when it's time to stop begging for a seat at someone else's table and start building your own. I stood up, I gathered the documents, and I made a decision I had never made in my entire life. I was going to choose me. The day after I uncovered the loan, I didn't get out of bed until almost noon. I just lay there under the quilt I'd made with my late husband, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, useless circles, just like the thoughts in my head. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. $60,000. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't an oversight. That was a decision. Chelsea had looked at the house I built with her father, the house I raised her in, the house where she blew out every birthday candle from age 3 to 18, and she saw it as collateral. I sat up slowly, pulled my robe tight, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. My knees ached, but not as much as my chest. I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee from yesterday's pot and took it black. No cream, no sugar, no softness. It fit the day. At the kitchen table, I laid everything out. The power of attorney form. She never shredded the bank correspondence addressed to her, not me, and the property record that showed the lien on the house, my house. What gnawed at me wasn't just the financial betrayal. It was the emotional math behind it. Somewhere in her mind, Chelsea had decided that I would never notice. Or worse, if I did, I wouldn't fight back. That's what haunted me. She thought I was too weak, too old, too worn down to matter. She hadn't come to me with a desperate request. She hadn't explained. She hadn't asked. She had just done it, quietly, confidently, as if she'd been planning this for a while. And maybe she had. I tried to replay our recent conversations, searching for any signs I'd missed. Every vague excuse about taxes, every sudden shift in tone when money came up. It was all there in hindsight. I'd just been too trusting, too busy loving her to believe she could use me. I thought of Ruby and Eli sitting in that Disneyland resort suite, giggling under Mickey-shaped lights, and Chelsea smiling carefree, funded by a lie. I felt something snap inside me. It wasn't rage. Rage is loud and hot and messy. No, this was colder, sharper. It was clarity. I had been erased from their vacation. Then I was erased from their plans. Now I realized I had been erased from my own future. Chelsea wasn't just discarding me from memories. She was writing checks in my name and building security for her family with bricks I'd laid. And worst of all, she didn't think I'd notice. I stood up. My hand rested on the back of the chair for balance just a moment, but it was enough to remind me that yes, my body might be slower, but my spirit wasn't broken. Not yet, and not by this. I walked down the hallway and opened the closet where I kept a shoebox full of old business cards and receipts. Tucked between a faded Tupperware card and a dog-eared brochure for a Hawaii cruise I never took was the number for Angela Moreno, an estate attorney I met at church years ago. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a decade, but that afternoon I dialed her number. "Margery Collins," she said, voice bright and surprised. "It's been a long time." I told her everything, the power of attorney, the lien, the unspoken plan to take over my house when I was gone. Angela didn't gasp. She didn't express outrage. She simply said with a calm steel in her tone, "I see this more than you'd think. And no, it's not okay." She scheduled me for the next morning. That night I didn't sleep. Not from fear, but from the weight of decision. I wasn't just filing papers. I was redrawing the lines of my life. At 10:00 a.m. sharp, I walked into Angela's office, hair-done blouse, pressed shoes, shined. I wanted to look like someone who mattered because I did. We canceled the power of attorney. We updated the deed. We rewrote the will. Angela helped me put legal safeguards in place so that no one, not even family, could touch what I'd built without my voice, my presence, and my permission. When I signed those new papers, I felt my hand shake, but not from weakness, from power. It had been so long since I'd done something solely for me, not for a child, not for a grandchild, not to keep the peace or smooth the wrinkles of other people's choices, just for me. As I walked out of the office, sun warming my face, I knew what I had to do next. I went home, opened my laptop, and started researching real estate in Prescott, Arizona, a town I'd once visited with my husband on a spontaneous road trip. He loved the hills. I loved the quiet. And right then, quiet sounded like heaven. I spent the next 3 days sorting through my things. Photos, dishes, books that old Christmas wreath Chelsea once said was too tacky but Ruby secretly adored. I wasn't running away. I was walking forward, finally. I listed the house, called the bank, notified the utility companies. I even called the family attorney Chelsea had used for the loan and told him directly, "You're no longer authorized to speak on my behalf. I'm not invisible. And I'm not afraid." The last thing I packed was the Minnie Mouse ears. I held them in my hands a long while before wrapping them in tissue paper and placing them gently in a small wooden keepsake box. They weren't a symbol of magic anymore. They were a relic of misplaced faith. But I wasn't bitter. I was awake. The night before I moved, I stood out on my porch, the same porch where I'd once watched Chelsea play hopscotch in the driveway. The same one where I'd lit candles every Christmas Eve, hoping she'd come early to help set the table. And I whispered something into the wind, something just for me. I loved you more than you knew. But I love myself enough now to stop proving it. Selling a house you've lived in for over 40 years isn't just a logistical job, it's emotional surgery. Every room holds a version of you that once believed in something. And when you decide to leave, you don't just pack boxes, you pack memories. Some come easy, others fight back. But I was ready. After meeting with Angela and securing every legal protection I could, I gave myself 1 week. 1 week to get my affairs in order. 1 week to vanish with dignity, without confrontation, without noise, without begging for understanding. No goodbyes, just closure. Mine. The first thing I did was take down the family photos from the hallway. One by one. There was Chelsea at 5 dressed as a pumpkin for Halloween. Chelsea at 9 holding her spelling bee ribbon. Chelsea at 17 wearing her cap and gown beaming. And me, always next to her. Always in the background, smiling, holding, supporting. My presence was the wallpaper of her life. Now I was peeling it down. I boxed the photos and labeled them Chelsea's, for delivery. I'd leave them behind when I left. Let her decide whether to keep them or toss them. The kitchen was harder. That's where life had actually happened. Brownie crumbs, birthday candles. The kitchen table still had scratches from where Ruby had done her homework with too much enthusiasm. I took a deep breath, ran my hand across the worn wooden surface and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the space itself. I kept only what I truly needed, a few mugs, 1 good cast-iron skillet, my mother's pie dish, and a set of flannel sheets that still smelled faintly of lavender. The hardest thing to pack was my husband's old flannel jacket. It still hung by the door untouched since the day he passed. It smelled like pine and aftershave, like comfort, like faith. I held it against my chest and cried for the first time since the betrayal. Not for Chelsea, not even for myself. For the woman I used to be, the woman who gave everything and asked for nothing, who believed love was a safety net, who believed that raising a child with both hands and a full heart meant they'd carry you someday with the same care. I cried for her because she deserved better. But when I wiped my tears, I felt stronger, sharper, lighter. I had done everything right, and now I was doing the bravest thing I had ever done, leaving. Silently, on my own terms. The house sold quickly, too quickly. A young couple bought it within 3 days of the listing. Newlyweds expecting twins. They fell in love with the garden, with the lemon tree, with the window seat in the den. I smiled as I signed the contract. I hoped they'd fill it with laughter, new laughter, the kind I no longer waited around for. Once the sale was finalized, I went to the DMV and changed my mailing address. I called my doctor and transferred my medical records. I unsubscribed from the church bulletin. I even stopped by the post office and put in a forwarding request just in case. Everything had to be tidy, clean, quiet. I didn't tell Chelsea. I didn't leave a dramatic letter or call her to say what she had done. I didn't accuse. I didn't shout. I simply disappeared. But I did leave one envelope, tucked neatly in her mailbox the morning they were due back from Disneyland. Inside was a short note, handwritten in blue ink. Dear Chelsea, I've moved. Don't worry about where. You'll figure it out if you really want to. I know about the loan. I know you didn't ask because you assumed I wouldn't understand. But I understand plenty. I understand that I raised a daughter who saw me as optional. I won't fight. I won't argue. But I won't stay where I'm not safe emotionally or otherwise. I loved you, and I always will. But I love myself enough now to start over. Mom. I included a separate letter for Ruby and Eli. No bitterness, just love. And a promise that if they ever needed me, they'd always know where to find my heart. On moving day, I filled the trunk of my silver Toyota with the only things that still felt like mine. A couple of suitcases, my art supplies, my dog-eared copy of Anne of Green Gables, and the box with the Minnie Mouse ears. I left just as the sun was rising. I didn't look back. Prescott, Arizona greeted me with a kind of silence that felt like balm. The air smelled different, crisp, piney, grounded. The streets curved gently through the hills, and the houses had wide porches that invited you to sit a while, to breathe. I had rented a little cabin just outside town, 2 bedrooms, a small stone fireplace, a patch of wildflowers in the backyard. It wasn't much, but it felt like enough, more than enough. On my second morning there, I made scrambled eggs, brewed fresh coffee, and sat on the porch with my feet tucked into wool socks. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for anyone to call. I didn't need them to. Because for the first time in years, I felt like the person in charge of my own story. I went into town that afternoon and signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center. There were 8 of us all over 60, all with some kind of past we didn't talk about too much. We painted sunflowers and old barns and the outlines of mountains we could see from the classroom window. It felt good to start from a blank page. I even found a little part-time volunteer gig at the town library, organizing the used book section. One of the ladies there, Carol, told me I had a librarian's soul. I laughed. Maybe I did. Or maybe I was just someone who finally had time to listen to her own quiet. A week later, I met Tom. He was browsing the historical nonfiction aisle. Tall, kind eyes, white beard, flannel shirt with elbow patches. We struck up a conversation about a book I'd just shelved. He used to work for Disney Imagineering, retired 20 years ago. Said the magic got a little too corporate for his taste. I liked it better, he told me, when it was about creating wonder for kids, not squeezing the last penny out of parents. I nodded. I liked it better when it felt like home. He smiled at me then. Not a flirt, not a fix, just recognition. 2 people who understood what it meant to be left behind by the very thing they helped build. That night I painted for hours. My hands smelled like turpentine and lavender oil. My heart felt soft again. Not fixed, but less broken. I didn't run away from my life. I walked into a better one. And I did it without yelling, without drama, and without needing anyone's permission. I was no longer the extra seat they forgot to count. I was the whole table. And I finally knew it. It's funny how silence used to scare me. Back in Anaheim, I kept the TV on for background noise even when I wasn't watching it. I told myself it was comforting that it kept me company. But really, I was just drowning out the emptiness. Here in Prescott, I wake up to birdsong and the slow creak of the wind nudging through pine trees. I don't miss the noise anymore. I don't miss the waiting. Most of all, I don't miss the feeling of being tolerated. My days look different now. I wake up early. I open the windows and let in the mountain air, cool and a little dusty with the scent of juniper. I make myself breakfast on my own terms. Some days it's just toast and black coffee. Other days I fry eggs in the old skillet I brought with me. I play Frank Sinatra on a Bluetooth speaker I bought secondhand, and I dance in the kitchen when no one's watching. Because now I'm not waiting to be invited into joy. I'm building it myself. At the library, I've become a bit of a fixture. I started helping twice a week, then 3 times. Carol and I now joke that I'm paid in used books and stories. We sort donations, reshelve returns, and drink weak coffee from the staff kitchen like it's a ritual. I even joined the town's monthly senior book and biscuit group. The books are mostly mysteries and historical dramas, but it's not really about the reading. It's about belonging. It's about people remembering your name when you walk through the door. They remember mine now. Margery. Not Chelsea's mom. Not the woman from that corner house in Anaheim. Just Margery. That's more than enough. Tom and I have struck up something too. I wouldn't call it romance. That word feels too fragile, too new. But it's a companionship that fits easily like a well-worn coat. He shows up with scones from the farmer's market, always a different flavor. We sit on my porch and talk about everything and nothing, old movies, aging knees, the strange freedom of no longer being needed by anyone but yourself. He doesn't ask for anything. He doesn't push. He just shows up. And that I've learned is a kind of love too. One Saturday, he brought over a jigsaw puzzle. 1,000 pieces. The box showed a quiet cabin beside a lake at sunset. "That's what I think heaven looks like," he said, setting it on the table. "I hope mine has coffee," I said, laughing. We didn't finish it that day, but it's still there on the side table, slowly taking shape, just like this new life of mine. Healing doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like doing dishes while humming. It looks like sleeping through the night without anxiety. It looks like standing in a room and not needing to shrink. But sometimes, just sometimes, something cracks open the past. A few weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail postmarked Pasadena. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Chelsea. I hesitated. For a long time. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and stared at the envelope as if it might bite. Inside was a card with a watercolor of Sleeping Beauty Castle on the front. Disneyland. And just 4 sentences, Mom. I came by and the house was empty. I didn't know what to say. I know I hurt you. I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Chelsea. There was no return address, just her phone number in the bottom corner. I held the card in my hands for a long time. Once I would have called immediately. I would have forgiven before she finished speaking. I would have swallowed my pain just to feel like her mother again. But I've changed. I didn't call. Not out of spite, not out of anger, out of respect for myself. Sometimes silence is not revenge. It's healing. It's a full sentence. It's a boundary. Later that evening, I wrote a response on my own stationery, the kind with the pressed lavender flower in the corner. Dear Chelsea, thank you for writing. I've found peace in my new life. I'm learning that love doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means letting go without hate. I hope you're well. Mom. I didn't mail it. Not yet. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. Some things deserve to be said even if no one hears them. Yesterday, Ruby texted me out of the blue. She had found my old Instagram account back when I used it to post watercolor paintings and garden photos. She said she missed my brownies. Said she wanted to learn how to paint like me. I replied simply, I'd like that very much, and I meant it. Because despite everything, the door to my heart is still open for love. But only the kind that knocks, not the kind that barges in. Now when I look at the Minnie Mouse ears tucked on the top shelf of my new closet, I don't feel pain. I feel perspective. I wore them in my youth as a mother desperate to create magic. I held on to them in my later years as proof that I mattered. Now they're just cloth and sequins. The real magic. It was never in the park. It was in me all along. There comes a time in life when you stop chasing after people who no longer see your worth. I used to believe love meant sacrifice, that if I gave enough, stayed quiet enough, showed up enough, people would value me. But I've learned something: you can't make people love you the way you deserve. You can only love yourself enough to walk away when they don't. Starting over in my late 60s wasn't easy, but choosing peace over pain, choosing dignity over drama, that saved my life. Not with fireworks or applause, just quiet mornings, honest friendships, and no longer waiting for a seat at someone else's table. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go without bitterness. If you're reading this and you feel forgotten, overlooked, or used, know this: you are not too old to start over. You are not too late to matter.